Helen, we're going to start this interview today where most businesses end, the breaking point. You were pregnant when you decided to launch Hopscotch, and you had a toddler at home.
Helen McGuire is a visibility strategist, best-selling author, and one of just 0.5% of women to exit a tech company.
She built an AI platform that served 80,000 women globally while raising 3 kids, skipping VC money, and proving the experts wrong.
She's here to show us how to turn credibility into power, even when the odds are stacked against you.
Regardless, as you say, of being pregnant, regardless of the fact that I had a toddler. So it's all my learnings from that journey. It's called a real life roadmap to nailing entrepreneurship because there was no blueprint. And I always say it's kind of, you need to be married to the problem, but not to the solution. Be very prepared to be divorced from the solution because you will have to divorce that solution over and over again.
I remember one night I'm sitting across with my head of operations and my co-founder, and we had these piling customer complaints, and we thought, what do we do? What do we do? So we decided to just stop the operation for a day until we fixed everything.
There was no blueprint for managing this with 3 small kids. There was no blueprint as a non-tech founder building an AI tech. How to raise from investors.
Helen, honestly, you've really shared excellent information. Helen, we're going to start this interview today where most businesses end, at the breaking point. You were pregnant when you decided to launch Hopscotch, and you had a toddler at home. What did that season in your life feel like? And what were the emotions inside of you? Did you ever think about walking away at some point?
Good question. More than anything, excitement. I think I'd spent a long time thinking about the business that I was going to build, coming up with multiple ideas. I come from an entrepreneurial family. It felt to me like a foregone conclusion that I would eventually go into business for myself. And when the frustration hit for the idea behind my first business, Hopscotch, it was just full on, 100%, regardless, as you say, of being pregnant, regardless of the fact that I had a toddler. And actually, I think those two things, if anything, fueled me. I did not want to fall into the trap that I was seeing other women at that point fall into, which was falling off the career ladder, feeling frustrated, not being able to get back into a job or a role that they felt that they deserved, that they'd worked incredibly hard to be at that level and to experience that level of leadership. And yet there were very few opportunities for those people in Dubai at the time.
And no blueprint around, right?
No, none. The idea for Hopscotch came really out of the blue one morning, sitting in a photography studio, learning how to use my camera because I was on maternity leave. I had a little bit of spare time. And the people around me introduced themselves, generally speaking, as just a mum. And when the teacher of that photography class probed a little further and said, well, what were you before you were just a mum? Their answers were very revealing. They all had very illustrious careers in their spaces, leadership positions. They'd had their own businesses at home.
So they get asked, what are you? They identify as just a mom.
Yeah.
And then when the probing question comes, you find out they actually had really interesting pasts.
Yeah.
But what was the problem then?
The problem was at the end of that photography class, at least half of them, there were 12 people in the class, at least half of them came up to me because I'd mentioned I work in advertising, my background in media, and that I was going back to work after my maternity leave, and asked me, can you get me a job? Can you introduce me to X, Y, and Z person? I'm only here because I'm bored and I have nothing else to do. My kids are at school now, And increasingly, I just saw this huge pool of talent. We're just thinking about Dubai here. This was 2013, 2014.
Back in the day.
Yeah, and it really bugged me. I just thought I wouldn't want to be in that position. I felt it was unfair for them to be in that position. And I felt the same about friends and colleagues I was seeing at the time. And it just felt like Dubai was one big kind of gap in the market opportunity. And I still feel like that about the city now. There are so many things that aren't here yet.
So interesting, yeah.
But 13 years ago, as you well know, there were even more of those things.
Right.
And it was just, how can we solve this problem? Is there a genuine problem there, which involves a lot of research, a lot of conversation, a lot of outreach over the following sort of 8 months or so? And if there is, what do we do to solve it? And that was it, I was off. And so my emotion, to come back to your original question, was really definitely excitement, definitely overwhelm, and not really knowing what the next step was going to be, kind of just building the plane as I flew it, pretty much. And I think it's a bit of a blur in many respects as well. I know that there were moments where it was difficult, certainly managing with the kids and everything else. But I also looked at them and thought, well, I'm building this for you. My eldest is a girl, my middle one's a boy, my third is a girl. And I thought, I'm building this for you because I don't ever want you to be in that situation either. And I want you to see that being a mum is not just being a mum. There is so much more you can do.
While being a mom.
While being a mum.
You lived in London, you lived in Dubai, you've lived in Singapore. And before your 2 startups, take me back to your childhood. Was there anything that set you up for this chaos, I would say, and clarity that came with being a mother and entrepreneur at the same time?
My childhood was super stable. So, I write about this in the book because I sort of go back to, I think, when you see entrepreneurs or when you see people that have achieved bigger things, let's say, beyond perhaps what was expected, you kind of expect that to have been a pattern their whole lives. And I wouldn't say that was for me. But I was always very curious. I was always very restless. I was always very eager to start new things. I was very happy with change. I was very happy with exploring. I was very happy kind of putting myself gradually as I got older in more uncomfortable situations and figuring those out as I went along. And I think that's partly because my upbringing was, for the most part, very stable. The one thing that happened during my teenage years was that my dad, who is an entrepreneur, lost his business when I was about 11. In the UK, there was a crash, 1989, 1990. And
Must have been tough.
It was very tough. I think I sort of woke up at that point because it was very challenging in terms of the emotional situation in the house, the pressures that were then on everybody that we'd never really felt before, financial pressures, emotional pressures, difficulties, the things that we were kind of forced to think about that we'd never had to think about before, how we were spending our time, what we were doing in the house.
It's almost like you go from a child to an adult all of a sudden, right?
It did feel a little bit like that. It definitely felt like we had much more responsibility.
Right.
There was much more awareness of kind of what we were doing and how we were spending our time and our money. And there was fear as well. There was a lot of fear around that, I think.
And how old were you at the time?
So I was about 11, 12 when this was happening. And this kind of went on kind of through my teenage years, on and off. And I think it just made me realize that, things are not certain. And it gave me a sense of, well, you've got to really keep pushing. Right. You've got to kind of go the extra mile because you never know what's going to happen. And it just it kind of fits with my personality as well. Like security and stability are a huge thing for me. It's in my astrological chart for any of those of you who are interested in that. But change is also a huge thing for me.
That's amazing, Helen. Look, there is something I'm interested in. Please do share with us a little bit about your book and why female founders should get your book.
So the Female Founder Formula is not just written for female founders. Surprisingly enough, probably half my readership so far are men. It's a feminine perspective on building businesses.
So for men too, then why don't we put it here?
100%. There we go. There we go. You can't miss it.
Okay. So what is it for? How does it help? You said 50% men and women. How does it help everyone?
This book was written when I sold my second business. I'm in the 0.5% of women who have achieved a successful exit from a tech business. Most women don't get to this point. I would say it's probably even less than that when you think about the fact that I had 3 kids and was moving around the world doing this. So it's all my learnings from that journey. It's called a real life roadmap to nailing entrepreneurship because there was no blueprint, as you correctly said at the beginning. There was no blueprint for the 2 businesses that I built. They'd never been built before. There was no blueprint for managing this with 3 small kids. There was no blueprint as a non-tech founder building an AI tech business. So I had to learn the hard way, how to build, how to scale, how to market, how to hire, how to raise from investors, and eventually how to sell the business as well, to have the business acquired. So it's all of those lessons in one book, but it's very much from, as you can imagine, a female perspective, which I think is very much needed in the world right now. 90% of the best-selling business books are written by men. There's very few that are written by women. So this is the dent in that armor, let's say.
Very well done. I'm sure, I'm going to double read it now because now I don't feel weird for reading it.
Good.
I want to take you back towards something that happened with me, actually. When I had my first business, we had gone from 2 locations to 3 locations. And we had these healthy food brands called Under 500 across the city. And what happened was because we had more than one branch, there was inconsistency in the food. So we would get customer complaints saying, I ate at one branch, it tasted like this, and the other branch different. And I remember one night I'm sitting across with my head of operations and my co-founder, and we had these piling customer complaints, and we thought, what do we do? What do we do? So we decided to just stop the operation for a day until we fixed everything. And that stop made me think about you. You had hopscotch, and then you decided that you wanted to stop that and go into tech. What does that feel like when you have to pivot everything you've worked so hard for? And what are things that you had to let go of to become the person that you are today?
It was an easy decision. It was a decision that had been building up over probably 2 years. So hopscotch went from 0 to 100 very quickly. We had, in the end, about 80,000 women in our network, in our community. We had 20,000 women on our mailing list. We were working with UN Women, Amazon, Facebook, HSBC, Nestle, you name it, right? I expanded it to Asia in 2018 when we'd moved over to Singapore. But what I recognized with that business was that it was very focused around me. So my kind of personal brand was a huge part of that business.
This was hopscotch, which is connecting people to work.
Yeah, this was hopscotch, which is purely focused on gender. So purely focused on connecting women to get back into work through training, through initiatives, through flexible work positions and so on. And it was only really scratching the surface. As I mentioned, we had tens of thousands of women. I'm not going to be able to get tens of thousands of women an opportunity on a monthly basis. I can only really help a handful. That to me is not solving the problem, or certainly not solving it at enough scale. And I recognized, as I said, probably 2 years into that journey, that we needed a better tech solution in order to scale it and in order to properly solve the problem. And I also recognized that the biases that were affecting women were also the same biases that were affecting people of colour, that were affecting those with disabilities, that were affecting those in a neurodivergent category. And so I really wanted to dig to the absolute root of this issue and create something that had not been created before to take the bias out of that decision-making process so that we were levelling the playing field for all people. If you had the right skill sets to get this job, regardless of whether you were 60 or whether you were 26, that should be your role. And so it was really a very easy decision when Antler came up. So Antler is an early stage VC, but it's an accelerator, essentially, 3-month accelerator program. Yeah. It's a tough one to get onto. It was a 6 interview process. When I was accepted onto that program, I was a little bit skeptical. As I mentioned in the book, I'd unfortunately been down lots of rabbit holes and chased after lots of things that were not really as worthwhile as they purported to be. But Antler was different. And Antler...
Do you join from Dubai or from somewhere else?
From Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was 2020, just as the pandemic hit in Singapore. And there were 80 of us going through that program. I think 40 or so finished. And the idea was that we were connected with an opposite brain, if you like. So my background is quite clearly media, commercial, advertising, communications.
Yeah.
I'm not a tech person, but I knew that I needed to build tech to solve this problem. And that's what Antler helped me to do.
Really good to know what you're good at, and more importantly, what you're not good at.
100%.
You know, you have to tell your ego at some point, like you can't win every game. Maybe co-founding could be the option. So tell me, how did you go about it then?
So I'd been very active, as I always am, in kind of networking events, community space in my particular industry. I'd met somebody who could potentially be a co-founder during that period of time that I was running Hopscotch and then kind of moving into Diversely. And when I finished Antler, her name just kind of popped into my brain. I know what I want to build now. I'm much clearer on what the outcome is. I'm much clearer on what the tech looks like. Who can help me do this? And so I picked up the phone. We had a kind of hour-long conversation, and it just went from there.
Wow.
And I was talking to, I run a community now called the Founders Sanctuary, and I was talking with my founders yesterday, and one of them had this exact question: how and when do you find a co-founder and onboard them? With myself and my co-founder at that point, we did a 3-month trial period, working remotely because it was COVID, so we couldn't actually meet each other anyway. But both in Singapore, recognized that we worked well together, that she could be the other half of my brain, if you like, that solved the kind of tech and finance bits that I didn't know about. And we launched the business a year later, having raised just over $500,000, and built the platform, built the AI that drove the platform.
Nice. And then, you sold Diversely much later.
Yeah.
You've written the book.
Yeah.
You coach female founders.
I actually don't coach female founders. I do a couple of things. I'm an executive visibility strategist. So through all the lessons that I learned about building visibility online, offline, through PR, through events, through media, through social media, I now help senior level executives to build their bank, if you like, and to gain opportunities and build authentic influence. But at the same time, I lead a community called the Founders Sanctuary, which I set up at the beginning of this year, because I recognize that many founders, particularly early stage, do not, and I would put myself in this bracket as well when I started, don't have access to good knowledge, good expertise, sound advice, judgment, the support of other founders. They're quite often in their own bubble. I did some one-to-one last year with some founders as a kind of test bed of, what do these people really need? What do they really need help with? And the Founders Sanctuary was set up with that in mind, to support founders, not just from a business perspective, but from a personal growth perspective as well. And there's a lot of that in the book. I studied Reiki and CBT last year, something I've always been interested in, but did not have time to do when I was running my two businesses. And I bring a lot of that to the Founders Sanctuary as well.
So look, practical advice. I'm now a founder. I come join the Founders Sanctuary. What can you tell me that I can apply in 1 week that will actually get me to change something or to notice and then to come back to you?
Yeah. The first module that we run through is called Clarity. And it's something that I found most founders will lack, is an understanding of their North Star, of the exact problem that they're solving, who it affects, why they're the best person to build it, and how they can solve that problem for people in a very clear statement.
I'm now at a 9 to 5 doing my full-time job. I have an idea. I want to launch this startup. I come to you. What can I do in a week now? Yes, I agree with you that I'm not sure. You always start with so many ideas, more than one idea, right? You're not sure. So tell me, what can I do in that 1 week to give me more clarity, as you say?
There's a framework that we use called I help such and such to do such and such by such and such, right? So it's a very simple statement that I explore in my workshops. We explore heavily during the first month of the Founder Sanctuary. It sounds very simple. It's extremely difficult to nail and to get right. But you really need to understand the exact problem that you're solving and how you plan to solve it so that you can then go out and test it. And even if you have a very clear idea of what you want to do, it's really important to build just a very kind of initial lean model and get it out there in front of people and test whether it actually lands with them or not, because the likelihood is it won't. You will have to iterate on this, as I have done multiple times, in order to actually solve that problem. And I always say it's kind of it's an MVP, exactly. And I always say it's kind of, you need to be married to the problem but not to the solution. Be very prepared to be divorced from the solution, because you will have to divorce that solution over and over again, whether it's because it's not solving the problem or whether it's because there's competition in your area, the landscape
might end
change.
up with a version of the thing you thought was going to work.
Exactly.
I've seen Jeff Bezos from Amazon say that you got to be focused on the vision, but nimble on the way to get there.
Yeah.
And I think that explains it, because if you're too tied to the idea, you might end up with taking it too personally when you realize that your idea actually is rejected.
Yeah. It happens constantly, and it should happen. Just because it feels like a solution to you doesn't mean to say that it is the solution for the people that you're trying to solve it for. So that would be the first port of call, is kind of, okay, let's get that clear and let's get off our bums, get out there and actually test it, whether that's via a survey, whether it's picking up the phone and talking to people, whether it's going into communities where that could be a problem. I've done all of those things, and they're really vital, and they will help you to shape what that solution eventually looks like. But do not spend any time or resources in creating a website or creating a brand or any of those things until you're super clear on that.
Like, I can do this for so-and-so. So you basically find out who you're solving the problem for, your target audience.
Yeah.
And you're saying until you actually have clarity on that, don't jump with both feet in the fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to go back to something you said, actually. You said you once felt like you weren't the one that was going to win in the room. And, you now sold your second brand, no VC money, and an inspiration for quite a few people. I want to say, why did you feel underestimated, and what are things you learned? How did you stop being underestimated?
Self-belief is a journey. It's a journey of discovery, and the more that you can prove to yourself by putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. Personally, I love the term imposter syndrome. You mentioned it earlier when we were talking to somebody outside. That is a sign that you are growing. It's a sign that you are expanding your consciousness. It's a sign that you are putting yourself in slightly uncomfortable positions so that you can learn something that will help you to grow. I hope that I always feel a little bit like that there's always a slight sense of imposter syndrome there. Otherwise, I know I'm getting too comfortable. And I think, there's no reason why I would have had the self-belief that I could have built and grown these companies. I proved it to myself time and time and time again, and I will continue to prove that to myself. And that is really what I would invite anybody to do. You don't have to have all the answers before you start. You don't have to have all the self-belief. The help is going to turn up when you need it most, in ways that you cannot possibly imagine now, but you've got to put yourself in that space first before that can happen.
Completely agree. It's about taking the 3-month plan, breaking it down to 1 month, into a day, into a habit in that day that you can improve to attract the reality that you want. To me personally, I always thought it's a game of people. And if you surround yourself with people that are doing the thing that you want to do, sometimes good things rub off on you, and you can learn from that person's experience. I have people that want to work today. They've always, they look for internships if you're a university student.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of a story I saw. Warren Buffett, he went to Benjamin Graham and said, I want to do internship. And, Benjamin Graham said to him, what are you going to do? And Warren Buffett offers to do it for free. And Benjamin Graham tells him, no, it's too expensive. You do it for free. But he still gets the job.
Yeah.
Today, Warren Buffett stepping down from his, from his company, which puts him at the second or third richest person in the world today. But he decided to find the person who's doing the thing he wants to do You know, he had read his book, and then he decided to work for him for free,
Yeah.
which is to show ultimate commitment and to actually care about showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lesson, you know, everyone wants to get paid, but I think there's that thing that separates when money separates you from the problem you're trying to solve, when it becomes a problem that you want to solve.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, that explains to me, and you know, those sleepless nights, why do you do it anyways?
Yeah.
Like, why is the problem more important than the money?
Than the money. I agree. And it always has been to me. And that's, you know, that's about alignment. And it's about kind of going out with a sense of service, really. You know, I want to solve this problem. I mean, the first few businesses I set up, and this has only really just dawned on me recently. I was not the ideal customer of either of those businesses. You know, I didn't have the problems that the business was solving the problem for. You know, I didn't have those issues myself. This platform that I've set up now, and what I'm doing now with executives and with founders, I am the ideal target. You know, I'm also a founder setting up a business for a third time, a very different business to the other two. So I'm also learning. You know, I've had to learn a ton of stuff since the beginning of this year to make this work.
So it's not a thing that if you make it one time, every business you do is going to work after?
I wouldn't say so, but I think that you certainly have more, obviously you have more experience, you have more knowledge. I mean, I know what I'm doing this time around. So it's, you know, it's more likely to work and to scale. And I know what to be attached to and what to not be attached to. I know what to create drama over and what not to create drama over. It all feels a lot more normal, let's say, this process.
It all feels a little more normal. All right. We're going to jump now to the rapid fire round.
Okay.
And answer in one word or in one sentence.
Oh, wow. Okay.
If you have to, you can, you know, go on a tangent.
I will do my best.
What's the best founder advice you initially ignored and then you started following?
I think listen to your gut. My husband's a founder as well, an entrepreneur. And as a female particularly in the tech space, you will get an awful lot of people who have never actually built businesses themselves trying to tell you or advise you on how to build your business or what to do. You can waste a lot of time and money on those things. You know, your business is yours for a reason. You are solving that problem for a reason. You probably know 10 times better than most of these people, and you definitely don't need to pay for their advice if they've not been there and done it themselves. And your point earlier about the Warren Buffett story, I would 100% agree with. You know, look for you in 5 years' time and talk to those people. You know, don't talk to the VCs and sadly, the majority of those people have never actually run their own businesses.
The VC model is broken.
It's crazy.
I know we're in the rapid fire round, but I had to throw
I
that
know,
statement
it
out
is
there.
crazy.
Like, you know, someone crunching numbers then advises a business owner how to run a business.
Yeah.
It's almost crazy.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, but with all of your experience, if you have a favorite book, what is a favorite book that you keep coming back to?
I mean, there's a few for sure. There's a book that I read probably 6 years ago now, which is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Stephen Covey.
Very old school book, written in the 70s, I think, or something. It completely changed the way that I do things pretty much overnight, or as long as it took me to read it.
Wow.
It's a really powerful book. And not just from a business perspective, but from a personal growth perspective as well.
That line he says about start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
That's, you know.
Yeah, always. That and the win-win, I'll always come back to the win-win. You know, there is no need for anybody to lose in these situations. If you can create a kind of circular economy where everybody is benefiting, I mean, arguably, that's how I sold my second business, you know, through creating partnerships, essentially. So that's a very powerful book.
Creating partnerships, amazing.
Yeah.
Great takeaway.
Yeah.
What is one habit that keeps you sane as a mom and a founder?
Meditation.
And do you take like long breaks or do you do like 5 minute, 20 minutes?
I do 5. Yeah. I mean, I started during COVID because we were locked down in Singapore for a significant period of time. There were 7 people and a dog in our house. 3 of those people were under 5 years old. So it was a bit nuts. And I just needed the space. And so I used to take myself upstairs and just find a space for 10 minutes just to ground myself, just to kind of remind myself of, various important things, just to align myself with what I was going to do that day, or what my intentions were.
So you sit down and think of nothing for 5 minutes?
No, I don't think of nothing. I actually use now. I use apps, or because I'm now qualified as a Reiki master, I can Reiki myself. But that takes longer. That's kind of a 30-minute
It's like a
practice.
guided meditation?
Yeah, I
with an
use a
app?
guided meditation. Yeah, so I use Aura, which again I think is in the book, and I always talk to every Monday within the community. I drop like a mindfulness Monday practice, because it's so powerful to start your day in an intentional way. It will set you up so that even if there are bumps in the road, you don't notice them quite as much. You can keep going back to what that intention was.
Intention, such a powerful word.
Yeah, well, it's what you do as a founder, right? So you need to stay on track. You need to not be distracted. You need to find a way of dealing with the chaos and gaining some perspective. And I think for me, that sort of, often it's only 7 minutes, and I don't leave my bed.
7 minutes.
7 minutes, don't leave my bed. I'm there with a cup of tea. I'm not in my yoga clothes on a meditation mat.
That's so like, if someone thinks, when I think right away YouTube, and everyone you look there looks and they look and they seem to be behaving in the same way. But what you're
No
saying
need.
is you can do it no need on your bed, 7 minutes. So what do? You tell yourself not to think of anything else, or do you focus on one certain thing?
So the guided meditation will take you through a particular practice. Sometimes it's about setting your intention for the day. Sometimes it's about settling your mind. Sometimes it's about setting your EQ, setting your emotions, how you want to feel versus how other people feel. Because often when you're in a lot of other people's energy, you can absorb that energy, and it can become very distracting around the day, particularly if you're with kids and whatever else.
That's like, you gotta reach like the final big boss to deal with kids. That's
Yeah.
different level of patience.
Absolutely. So there's different ways of doing it. And then sometimes when I've been through that exercise and the meditation ends, I will then sit there and just be very kind of still and try to just achieve a kind of what they call in Buddhism no mind. So just as you say, kind of not to think of anything. But Reiki advises that actually that can be very difficult. My Reiki master is he's a Buddhist, he's Sri Lankan, and he spent his childhood being told to meditate, and it just didn't work for him. And so he now allows thoughts to enter his mind, but to observe the fact that they are just thoughts and they are not him.
How do you know what's yours, and how do you dislocate from what's not yours? Like, you have a thought in your head now. How do you know if it's because of someone you met and they've planted that thought in your head, or if it's from a conversation with someone and it's not your thought versus someone else's?
That's practice. There are really kind of 3 elements to any human, and this is written in Buddhist scripture and has been discussed in religious scriptures for millennia. But it's also, if anyone reads the work of Professor Steve Peters, it's also a scientific fact that your mind is not you. Your body is not you. You are a very separate entity. So there are basically 3 strands to a person. There's your mind, which will constantly be thinking, your ego essentially, will constantly be thinking of thoughts, ideas, narratives, stories, fictions a lot of the time, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. You have the ability to observe those thoughts and to judge whether they are useful thoughts or not useful thoughts. And it's very important that you can separate yourself from those thoughts in the same way that you can separate yourself from your body. You are not your body. Okay? If you lose your arm, you don't lose yourself, right? And that's a very important distinction as well.
You said there was 3 levels, and one is to dislocate the thought from you, and the second one was
your body. So your body, your mind, and you. And you can think of this from a spiritual perspective, not necessarily a religious perspective, but you can also think of it from a scientific perspective as well. And as I mentioned, Steve Peters, his book is probably this thick, and he's written maybe 3 of them now. He's a neuropsychologist, I think, incredibly intelligent man who advises very high-level people. And he understands how the brain works, and this is now, a scientifically proven fact. So meditation is if you talk to any clinical doctor, they will tell you that there are physical changes in the brain when you meditate. And it's about you being able to separate yourself from your situations, from your thoughts, from your
Physical
processes.
things happening in the brain because you're meditating.
Yeah, the brain looks different.
Helen, honestly, you've really shared excellent information. Some of it is first-time information for me as well, so I like learning and listening. But I think there's a lot of people, especially in my audience, all over the world, that are tuning in. They like to understand where they can reach you as a founder. If I'm a founder stuck somewhere in my idea, not knowing where I am on your framework or how I can access you, where is a place that they can reach that you would actually look at that message and come back to them?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, as you probably know. So I got my LinkedIn top voice last year. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, Helen McGuire. Very easy to access me there. Also super happy if you want to email helen@helenmcguire.co. Couldn't be easier. And yeah, I'm always happy to have these conversations. I'm here to support other founders and leaders to move forward now. That's really my mission. That's really my goal. So all of these things that we talked about today, whether it's personal growth, whether it's meditation, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's obviously business growth, which is fundamental to the whole thing, is what I'm about. It's what I'm trying to support others on.
Helen, so great for you to share, especially about your book as well. But there's people that now, I haven't told them to subscribe and they're watching my episodes and I get the view, but they don't subscribe to the channel. What do you have to say to them?
I would say that it's an excellent opportunity to learn, to advance whatever it is that you're working on now, because you speak to some incredible entrepreneurs from such diverse backgrounds, and diversity of thought is a huge bonus for any founder. So hit the subscribe button, tune in, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Helen. And I just want to ask you one final thing before we get off the show. Your kids, the beautiful kids you were talking about, if they were going to watch this 10 years from today, what do you hope they hear?
I wrote that book to inspire my kids because they'd inspired me to start. So I hope that they hear the part particularly around self-belief and that you don't need to have it all figured out at any one particular point in your life. There's always progress you can make if you put yourself out there. And I hope that's what cuts through for anyone who has an idea, as you say, and who wants to make an impact, make a difference.
Thank you for being here, Helen.
Thank you for having me.